Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest was a serial entrepreneur from the age of 15, starting companies that did everything from restroom marketing to payphone manufacturing. In his early 20s, he founded the world-famous Melrose Flea, almost on a whim, and currently runs the Los Feliz as well as Odd Night at the Autrey. The journey from Melrose to Los Feliz took him through a dark, circuitous path of cigar bars and heroin addiction, but he lived to tell the tale. And I had, as you will see, a great time sitting down to hear it. Won't you please welcome Phillip Dane.
So, I grew up on Upper East Side, Yorkville.
Right.
With Joe on. I listened to Joe. Joe grew up in the same hood.
Same hood.
So Yorkville, my dad is from New York. Grew up in the Upper East Side.
Right.
My mom's from Detroit.
Right.
Anyway, I born and raised in Manhattan.
What were they doing in New York?
Both in advertising. Well,
right.
they met through advertising, but my dad was a big film editor.
Oh,
when they actually used film.
Like sure. When they'd be like running that. See those guys with the strips of celluloid
just laying
all
on
over
it.
them.
It was amazing. It was amazing. So, but I grew up really. My mom, single mom. Mm-hmm. They divorced when I was 3.
Right.
Living on the Upper East Side. My mom worked like 2 jobs, and I always say I was raised by the Puerto Ricans.
Right. Why?
It was the doormen and the
right.
Maintenance guys are all Puerto Rican.
Right.
And that's when I learned how to make coffee the right way, which is light and sweet, because
that's
it's the only way a true Puerto Rican will drink your coffee. I found out. So, I'll be honest. I was at Studio 54, Xenon, all Limelight, Slimelight,
right.
and all those clubs when I was real young. I was like. I think it was.
What brought you into those places? Just like curiosity? You were into the scene? What's the story?
Yeah, I was into, like I said, I started this business up. One of them was advertising. So I think it was 15, and I had this idea of putting advertising in toilets.
Advertising.
And so I named it Lavertising.
Amazing.
And
were people doing that? Was that a thing?
No, it wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And my biggest client was New York City.
Right.
It was the Keith Haring time. And so they would pay me to put in, the AIDS awareness stuff, the Keith Haring pictures in all these toilets. And so I did that. And then I had 540 Apartments. I did that when I was.
What's 540 Apartments?
Well, I had this business where I said, everybody's looking for apartments in New York.
Right.
Well, so I had this concept of taking, the porn stuff, when you would call 540 sex or whatever it was, right? I said, well, why wouldn't that work? Why wouldn't this work for apartments, right?
I feel like out on Long Island it was 976.
It may have been.
But I know what you're talking about.
So I started 540 Apartments, and I happened to be introduced to the chairman of Gannett back then.
Yeah.
I don't remember why. I was like, I don't know, I was like 15 or something. And everybody used to laugh because I acted a lot older. I looked a lot older.
Right.
When they got to meet me, they would realize, how old are you? And I would, lie. So I started that, and I started the 540 Apartments, and I had my own place in Upper East Side because my mom moved into a Michelama building, like a rent. It was a 20-year waiting list for this place on 81st in York. And she was all excited. After 15 or 20 years, she got in.
Right.
And I said, well, I don't want to move.
Right.
So I was like the youngest tenant in Glenwood.
So you stayed in your old apartment?
I stayed in my own apartment. I was like 16,
and you had
17.
enough money to pay the rent? She was like, all right, if you can pay it, you can stay?
Kind of, sort of.
Right.
Me and money have had like that weird relationship for many, many, many years. 3 bankruptcies later.
Right.
I'm an open book when it comes to that.
Sure.
Probably started 45 different businesses over the years. I just loved. I don't even know where the hell it came from, man. It was like nobody in my family was doing any of that stuff. But
was advertising and 540 Apartments, were they successful?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, 540 Apartments all of a sudden started to, and it was really funny because all I would do is from my apartment on the Upper East Side, I would grab the newspaper, the New York Times on Saturday.
Right.
And I'd literally sit there with this little special recorder and I'd go, hi, on the Upper East Side, a 1-bedroom and I'd have this whole thing.
Just read
People thought that I was the guy from 777 Film all the time. It was pretty funny.
Amazing.
Well, all of a sudden, the numbers started jumping. Like, how many calls? Like, one month, I was averaging, maybe a couple grand a month or whatever, which was great back then. Then all of a sudden, I started getting checks for like 20,000.
How were you getting paid? Every time they dialed the number?
AT&T would send you a check,
Right.
Then I get a call from AT&T saying, sorry, we made a mistake here. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, every other phone call going into 540 Apartments was going into a porn site.
Right.
And I was getting the money for it.
Right.
So I was making like all this money, and they asked me for it back, but I'd already spent it.
Yeah, sure.
So they said, well, it's our fault. So that was my 540 Apartments.
Wow, that's
story.
amazing.
I thought I was doing really well. I'm like, God,
Turns
there's
out
a lot of people looking for apartments.
You weren't doing
this is great.
What a dumb business. That's hilarious.
So that was just two of them.
But I can understand if you're doing that and making money, like why school? Who needs fucking school?
Well, this is the thing. I went to Xavier, I got kicked out. I went to LaSalle, and I couldn't handle the brothers.
Right.
I went from Jesuits to brothers.
Right.
And they were crazy.
Right.
So I left there, and I went to, my mom got me into York Prep, which was really expensive, Upper East Side, private school.
Right.
I was a year behind Robert Chambers, the yuppie.
Sure.
The guy that
Yuppie
killed
rapist, right?
He killed Jennifer Levin in the park. He was nuts. He was absolutely nuts.
Robert Chambers.
Yeah,
right.
He was like the panty rape.
Who did he kill?
Jennifer Levin.
That was her name?
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went to school there.
And you could tell back then that he was a monster.
You know what? I didn't really know the
Right.
guy. He was in a different. He was a year older than I was, but in a whole different ball game.
Right.
I didn't come from money.
Yeah. So
They,
that
they
whole
all came from
world,
lots of money.
Yeah.
And they were really privileged and entitled. And I was just happy doing what I was doing.
Right.
I think I was 17 when I was in Rhode Island at a camp doing volunteer work at a camp, and I met a girl that was there, and she wound up moving in with me from Rhode Island. So things happened like really quick.
Right.
I had my first live-in girlfriend when I was 16, 17. I think she was 23.
Right.
And it just kind of happened that way. As far as like getting into, I was big into clubs, and we would do the mesc, and I would try coke every once in a while, and I would try the drink, and the drinking was great. But
it's interesting. I mean, you're like this sort of serial entrepreneur. You're growing up fast. You're like you've got a girlfriend. You're pretty independent. I mean, why did you? Do you remember the first time you did like drugs, like mescaline or something?
Oh, yeah.
What was the first drug episode?
I think the first drug that I did was mesc. And it was going to Studio 54.
Right.
And I was like 16.
Right.
And I'll never forget, it was like Mark Beneke was the guy at the door. That was the blonde guy working the door all the time. And it was just a group of us from this, entitled high school.
Right.
And I guess we looked good enough.
Right.
And we would go. I'd never seen lines like this. I mean, back in the day, I don't remember.
Sure.
Studio 54 had lines. They were literally 8 people wide,
right,
on the
and
sidewalk,
all the way
and then
around
they would
the
go
block.
all the way around the block,
Yeah.
and we would just walk by, and we would literally grab like a couple hot people on the way in. It didn't matter if they were guys or girls.
Right.
And we just walk in like the party of the scene.
Yeah.
None of us really understood why that happened.
Right.
It was just one of those cool phenomenons where we knew that, and then we knew that if we stopped going, they might go away.
Yeah.
And we never wanted to be those bridge and tunnel
stuck
people,
in that line.
which is,
Yeah.
So that never happened. So did mesc. I dug it. I thought it was cool, but it was never my scene. My drug was always, honestly, my drug was always business.
Yeah,
like starting companies.
it makes
It
sense.
was like the adrenaline rush.
Yeah, of course.
I was a junior in high school, and I was just turning senior, 1985. They deregulated payphones, and I read about it, and I said, "Oh, this would be really cool." So I contacted a manufacturer that started making their own payphones. They were like mini computers inside a box, And I contacted Cumberland Farms, and I sounded older, and I literally cut out of school. It was like in third period or second period. I had to leave, and I went to the airport, and I met the guys, the manufacturers, and we literally flew to Massachusetts to Cumberland Farms.
Right.
And at 17, I did a pitch, and it was it was really cool. I had to put the coin in. Made a phone call.
Right.
I got back home, and on my answering machine, because we had answering machines back then, you'd push the button.
Yeah, sure.
And Hey, this is, so and so. Just want to know you won the contract.
Oh my God!
And it was
hilarious.
almost a $2 million contract. Now,
how many phones did they want?
It was 1,500 locations. But here's the thing. It never happened because it was too premature. Like, the manufacturer couldn't even handle it.
Right. It's like, what are you fucking doing?
Well, not only that, we found out later that, if you put a phone up on a wall and you walk across the carpet and you pick up the phone and you shock it, you just broke the phone.
Oh, wow.
That's how it was in the infancy stage.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was I got lots of those fun stories, but it wasn't until I moved out here. So I came out to LA in 91.
Did you graduate? Did you go to college?
No, another part of it was I went to York Prep, these private schools. They pride themselves on their 99%, which is what I call it. 99% of our students go to college, right?
I should fucking hope so.
So if you're paying that much money, it should, and I didn't want to be that 1%.
Sure.
So what happened was I was never really in school. I was always absent.
Yeah.
I got kicked out of York Prep, not once but twice.
Right.
So I got kicked out, and then they let me back in. And then he became a client because I had another side hustle going on, which was premium incentive items. Those were hot, So there were like these little razors that folded up into like these little matchbooks. They looked like matchbooks. You would unfold them, and it was a portable razor, to shave with.
Right.
So, and then I had these other little novelty items. Anyway, the school wound up becoming my client. So I wound up charging them, which was great.
Right.
But then they kicked me out a second time.
Right.
And then I spoke to the owner of the school, which was the headmaster. Who his wife Jamie was the counselor. Like her job was to get you into college.
Right.
Well, I think out of how many days you're supposed to be in school, 180 something, whatever it is. I think it was probably there 18. Right. 19 days. It was bad.
Right.
And I said, what the hell? On my own letterhead, I sent a letter into University of Hartford, not Harvard. Right. Which some people look at me and Hartford and Bridgeport because I liked Connecticut. Yeah. And they were good schools.
Yeah.
So I sent it in, unbeknownst to the school, New York Prep. And about 2 weeks later, I got an acceptance letter into their business school, even though my grades were horrific and everything. But I sent them my financial. I sent them, I think, a profit and loss and a write-up about
how much stuff you've done.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not really into the
school stuff,
but it would be great if I could come there and I'll give it, Got into both. I get a call from the headmaster. It's like, listen, you need to start your college applications and stuff. I said, oh, no, I already got into Bridgeport and Hartford. Right. Well, I mean, both of them thought I was nuts. And it turned out I got into college before anybody else. It was crazy. I was like, this is so cool.
Risky business right here.
It was really it was neat, And I deferred it, though. Right. And I've deferred it for like 40 years. 40 years.
Never went.
Yeah, whatever. It never went.
That's amazing.
But I don't advocate that. But I went to, cut to, in 91, I was hired to do some consulting work in Chatsworth. Uh-huh. And I don't remember what I was, like 20 something, whatever, early 20s. And I wound up going to the Rose Bowl. So there's 3 days before I was done with my contract in Chatsworth. I was supposed to be going back to New York. And I think I was 21. Right. And somebody invited me to the Rose Bowl. Right. And I went to the Rose Bowl and I said, this place is huge. This is crazy. Right. It's like you got to walk in with like 20 grand to be happy because there's just so much stuff to buy and whatever. It was a hot day. We left. We went to the Snake Pit on Melrose. Remember that. And I proceeded to get really drunk. Mm-hmm. And I got into my car and I started driving. And I pulled over at Melrose and Fairfax thinking I shouldn't be driving. Right. So I had the wherewithal to know, this is a little over the top. So stopped. And I just hung out there and tried to sober up. And I looked over at that empty parking lot. And I said, it was at the Fairfax High School. Right. I said, oh, that would be a good flea market. Right. And that was on a Sunday. So Monday I called, and on Wednesday they actually gave me the contract. In 3 days. I was supposed to leave to New York. So the flea market.
And you started the Melrose Flea?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes. So that was that. Now I met my ex-wife. She was a vendor there. Right. And we...
just walk me real quickly through the economics of a flea market from your point of view. So you're leasing the property and organizing security and insurance and that kind of thing. And then what? You're just selling vendor booths to the people, and they pay a flat fee. Do they also give you a part of their profit?
Well, there are different models to it. Right. But we've never done that. We just do flat fee.
Right. Easy thing. You don't have to keep track of what people are selling. You're going to get ripped off that way anyway.
Yep. So it's a lot of people think it's real easy to do. They go out and try it. It's not.
Yeah.
It takes an average of anywhere from a year to 3 years for it to get its legs, so that if it's going to work.
And how soon after securing the contract did you have your first market?
Oh, I think it was probably about a month.
Right.
So I opened that market up in 91. I had 40 vendors. That's it.
Right.
40 vendors, and I opened it on the windiest day in the history of wind, actually. Right. I think it was in the Bible or something. It was horrible.
I think the people on the west coast of Florida might disagree with you right now.
Right now they might. But, for 91, it was a historic day.
Right.
And I had some guys come up from San Diego. I'll never forget them. And they specialized in hand-blown glass.
Right. Oh.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And here I am, and if you saw me, if you had pictures of me back in that day, I had a huge Great Dane. Mm-hmm. I was this big cigar smoker. I was 21 years old, completely out of my mind. I looked like I had just rolled in from Palm Springs on I don't know what it would have been, but I had the shirt all the way open. I looked like New York crashed into Palm Springs.
Right.
Went drastically wrong. And I would sit there, but I was really excited about it.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun. And I'm sitting there, and literally, as wind is blowing and tents are flying and shit is falling onto the ground and glass is shattering, I'm literally thinking, all right, I'm out of here.
Right.
It's a Sunday. I'm going to catch a flight on Monday because they might come after me.
Right.
And I'm sitting at this little table that I had set up. And every one of them, all 40 of them, came up and said, can we pay you in advance for the month?
No way.
And I'm looking at them going, all your stuff is shattered on the ground. And they're like, yeah, but you don't understand. You've got the hottest spot in town.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, really?
Do you still run that?
No. So what happened with that one is, that's when.
I mean, my daughter's still good. My daughter, 15.
Well, we have a much better one now.
Right.
We have my wife and I started Los Feliz Flea.
The Marshall one.
Marshall.
The one Marshall. Yeah, she goes to that one too.
We have 230 vendors now.
Yeah, that's
amazing. And it's blown up.
Wow.
And it's highly curated.
Yeah, no, and that's go-to. I mean, that's required attendance for a certain age level of person on the east side of Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
She has friends coming from the Palisades to go to that.
I love it. That makes me happy.
Wow,
and my wife
that's
does.
So cool.
Honestly, I'm kind of retired.
Yeah.
She does all the social media.
Right.
Within a year and a half, we went from no followers on Instagram to I think we're 57,000.
When did you start that one?
Right. We started it pre-pandemic.
Right before the pandemic.
And then the pandemic hit. We closed. We had a soft opening. Yeah. And there was that little window.
Yeah.
Then we shut down again.
Right.
And then now we're just, full steam ahead.
That's so cool. And how long did you do the Melrose Flea for?
I had that for I built it up 3-4 years.
Right.
And then it was this is where the age thing came into play. Huge ego back then. Not that I don't now, but you know what I mean? It was it was different. It was, I was just pissed.
More bristly.
Because they raised my rent 300%.
Right.
And I got really pissed.
Right.
And hindsight's always 20/20.
Right, sure.
If I knew then what I know now, I would have probably still owned it.
Yeah.
But no, it was taken over by my coffee vendor, who I didn't talk to for many, many, many years.
Who's the coffee vendor?
It was really bad, And
what is the coffee vendor that's there?
Well, the guy that runs it now.
Right.
Yeah. So he runs it now.
Right. He's no longer selling coffie?
No.
Well, because coffee seems like such a good business.
Well, not when
you compare it to that.
Thing,
right.
So, but yeah, so it's still there. But we do the Los Feliz Flea every Saturday, and then we do odd nights at the Autrey, which is a fun event.
Right. Odd nights at the Autrey is what?
Every
But I mean, what is it about? I've heard you talk about it before.
It's a huge family festival thing where we bring in about 20 food trucks.
It's food trucks.
We also have about 80 vendors, crafters.
Oh, right.
We have huge inflatables, massive inflatables that kids and adults love. We have full bar.
Right.
We have admission is included into select galleries, which is really nice because it's kind of like your personal.
It's a win-win. You get to see the museum and
we also have live bands and all that.
Cool.
And people love it. Every time I try to shut it down, well, it's done now for the season, April through September.
Right.
And every year I say this is it. I don't want to do it
doing
anymore.
This shit.
And literally one of my daughters was with me this last one.
Right.
And we're walking through, and she was cracking up because every booth we went to, they were like, "Can't you just do one more month?"
Yeah, right.
And I'm looking at them going, I don't even want to do this at all. What are you talking about?
Well, especially because the weather gets so nice right now.
Yeah. So that's that. And then we actually saved LACC swap meet.
Oh, no way.
Which is been going on for like 25 years.
Yeah, sure.
And we just took it over about a year and a half ago.
How cool.
So that's great. But so it was kind of a gradual progression.
Right.
Drinking and drinking
Sure.
and then the drugs that came with it afterwards. Started when I was, I think it was about 37, believe it or not.
Right. Wow.
And I realized...
So that's like 15 years after you start the
yeah.
Melrose Flea.
Yeah. And then I owned a cigar bar in Beverly Hills.
What was that called?
Phillip Dane Cigar Lounge.
Holy fuck.
And
Where was that?
I took over the Banana Republic. It was 2,500 square feet. And we opened the same
Where
time
was
Grand
it, though?
Havana Room opened.
Right.
On Little Santa Monica, right next to where the Nosh it was.
Yeah, I remember. I think I had I was never a smoker, but I remember having like a glass of wine with an agent
But see, that was
there.
my first experience to like sober people.
Right.
I didn't know what sober people were. I didn't know what like this
Right.
program of recovery was, any of that stuff.
Right.
So I owned this bar, and I would have all these guys come in.
Right.
On I think it was a Friday night. Turns out there was some big meeting called Rodeo.
Right, right.
Right?
So they would come after the rodeo.
They would come
meeting?
after,
right?
and they would drink coffee and smoke cigars.
Amazing.
And we became friends, and they would see me, and I would put down a drink and walk away from it.
Right.
And they would just look at me like, and one guy actually stopped me one day. He said, "Can I just ask you something?" It's like, does it ever occur to you to go back to that drink?
Right.
And I said, well, I own the bar, so I can go back to that drink or any other ones anytime I want. I didn't really understand it, Cut to, it was my ex-wife's birthday, and she wanted to party.
Right.
And we went, and that's when it all went. That's when it started downhill.
Right.
We tried some drugs.
Right. What'd you try?
Heroin.
Right. Oh. Yeah, heroin. That's.
It's actually my favorite.
You and a lot of people.
Me and heroin had a fantastic, loving relationship for many years.
What prompted you to try it? Like, why?
She wanted to.
She was like, I just am curious.
Yeah, well, no, she had done it years ago, years before, and hadn't done it for many, many years.
Right.
I didn't know that she was an alcoholic, and became, so we basically became full-blown alcoholic drug addicts together.
And so, where, like, the first time you scored, where'd you get the dope?
We drove to a buddy that had it. It was her birthday, and we were at that club, that Kane. What's his name?
Oh yeah, Kane.
Yeah,
it was called Kane.
Yeah, it was
at the bottom of Gower. Gower and Melrose.
Well, I was friends with him from all the bar days.
He had that burlesque show a couple of times a week, and that thing was amazing.
Right, so we went
Such
to
a
that
great spot.
But me and this guy it was a double date thing. We drove and we got it. Turned out that I was the only one that had never tried it before.
And did you guys smoke it?
You smoked it, and then we actually stopped in a bathroom on a mobile station. Now, if you knew the guy I was with,
right, I probably do.
He was the exact opposite of me. No, exact opposite. He was Jewish from like well-to-do family,
right.
Owned restaurants, the whole bit.
Right.
Total opposite of. I was like the dark.
Right.
I was the dark side.
Yeah.
And but I'd never done any of this
right.
stuff. But he did. So we went in this bathroom. We stole a spoon from Musso and Frank's because that's where we ate first.
Right.
We stole a spoon, and I said, "Why are we stealing the spoon?" He goes, "Don't worry, I'll show you."
You'll see, right?
And so we get there, and we melt it down, and with some water, and then he had a Visine bottle, and we poured it into the Visine bottle, and we were just using it with droppers,
sticking it in your eye.
We could drop it in the eye, or you could actually spray it into your nose.
Wow,
oh my God!
Civilized.
We got there. It was pretty gross.
And when you put it in your eye, how does that feel?
Oh, it immediately started to itch.
Oh, interesting.
And I had no idea what this stuff was,
right.
So I was like, what the heck? Why am I itching?
Right.
That was the end of it. I honestly fell in love with the drug, and then my favorite was Knob Creek. You had to have Knob Creek and heroin.
That sounds like a good combo. What did it do for you that you liked so much? Like, what was the feeling that, like...
God, it's so weird because thinking about it now, I'm totally
right.
disgusted.
You're like,
it's like, it's like, if I play this one out, it's like, yeah, no.
Gross.
My wife used to always say, no, honey, that's euphoric recall.
Yeah.
Like, well, I must have a lot of that.
Right.
Because, God, it sounded so romantic back then. It was disgusting. So, but the feeling was that kind of, it was a warm, fuzzy,
right.
out of body feeling that like, oh, wow.
And so you're into it from that first go.
That was it.
Because it's funny, I remember when I was in college, these girls that I used to party with asked me, they called me to get me to come do heroin with them, and I was so hungover I didn't pick up the phone, and then I went out to eat some food, and I didn't check my messages until they had already done it, and so it was one of the few opportunities where it was offered to me. And I just blew it. I just blew it. I would have definitely said yes. They were like super fun girls. I loved partying with them and hanging out with them. And I'd probably be dead. But they didn't. It seemed like they didn't have a great time on it. But who knows?
Well, the first time you do it, that whole
they just
chasing the dragon thing. Always wanting that first feeling. That first feeling never comes back.
Right.
You never get it. So basically, and then. It's not cheap either.
Yeah.
So it gets expensive. Luckily, I had some. I say luckily. So I got into like the drinking and all that was amazing. So I was in a really dysfunctional marriage. Had 2 kids while I was loaded. Opened up cigar bars in Fantasy Island, the strip club.
Right.
While I was married, it was horrific. It was horrific.
It sounds like a lot to
and it was
manage.
And it lasted for like 15 years, 13 years. And here's, I never got arrested. I never got caught. I never got a DUI.
Right.
Never lost everything.
Right.
Mine was like this spiritual bottom.
Yeah.
It was emptiness. My daughter one of my kids was turning 6 years old.
Right.
I had kicked heroin and drinking for like the 3rd time cold turkey.
Right.
There's a lot of other stuff that goes on with it, but it worked for a long time. It was fun. Even my daughters back then, they were like, "Dad, we didn't even realize you. We just thought you were a blast." Like driving down in a Range Rover down the wrong side of the mountain in Big Bear because there was all beautiful snow, but it says "Don't enter." I thought that was fun, and so did they.
Sure.
But truthfully, in hindsight, it's like. You want to talk about a guardian angel or a higher power, somebody looking out for me.
Right.
Completely evident my entire life.
Right.
Sure. In the moment, didn't realize it. I'm
like,
son of a, this. But again, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, it's like, wow, I did that. And I lived through it.
Yeah.
Sure. And like my kids were with me. It was horrific.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And so. Yeah, that was the Big Bear story.
It's funny. I'm a God skeptic, and yet sometimes when I hear a story like that, and I think of my own experience, I'm like, well, what other explanation for your survival that makes sense could there possibly be other than a loving God?
It's true.
That actually cares about you.
It's true.
I'm hard to get there, but every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, well, why else are you still here if God doesn't love you?
Well, Nick, those are those moments. Those are the moments that it's like because I'm the same way. I'm like,
it's like, right, of course.
Yeah.
And so what happens? Like, what brings you to your knees? You say you tried twice to get.
Oh,
you succeeded, and then
I said, you know what, this is. Well, here's what happened was I had 2 or 3 people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
They were celebrities or famous named people.
Right. Yeah.
That also liked to partake in this stuff.
Right.
So I became Philly the pharmacist, purveyor of fine pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
That was my title.
Right.
And I was probably making, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 a year, just
on your pharmaceutical business,
distributing this to 3 different people.
Wow. Yeah. That's.
And
that's.
Oh,
that's amazing.
And it was crazy because it was so easy, but it was so up and down. Like it was feast or famine. Like if I was like really, like
desperate for
cash, I'd call them up and go, "Hey, I got a special on heroin."
Right.
It's like, who has a special on heroin?
Everybody.
It's like what?
Where would you get your supply?
I had some people.
Right.
Some people, but I remember when I decided that this was not. It's not going to work for me anymore. It just couldn't work anymore because my daughter. It's the 3rd time I was kicking hardcore. For those who don't know about, getting off of alcohol and drugs. And I was at that point, I was probably snorting 5-6 Oxycontins at a time.
Right.
I had everything.
Right.
I was literally Philly the pharmacist.
Yeah.
So I had, 500 pills and bottles in my car, and it was just crazy lifestyle. And I one of the kids was turning 6, I think it was, and I had to, when you kick that stuff, your legs don't work anymore.
Right.
Now there's a lot of stuff, but
yeah.
your legs don't work, and you never think you're going to walk again.
Right.
So I climbed, I fell out of bed,
Uh-huh.
and I went we lived in a duplex, and I could look downstairs, and of course the girls were young enough, so Daddy just had a really bad cold.
Right.
And it was a really bad cold. And I just started bawling. I was like, you're my kids. It's like, this is who I've become?
Yeah.
This is horrible. It's horrible. And, somebody just said, hey, you want to get some help? And took me.
Who was that?
Back then it was actually, can I say their name?
You can say their first name.
Well, it was this guy, Chris, and another guy, Barry. And they would literally come to my house. And
Are they people I know or no?
You might. And then there was...
Well, tell me who it is and I'll cut it.
Well, then there was Chad. Then I started going to Tropical.
Right.
The Tropical meeting. I got sober out in Moore Park. At the Moore Park meeting.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
I was living in Studio City. They would come and pick me up and they would take me there.
How did those guys know that you were, like, what was the...
I'm going to honestly, I don't remember how I even walked into the first meeting. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
But I think it may have been my ex.
Right.
I don't remember. But we both kind of went in. I was in and out for a while.
And when you were kicking, was she kicking as well?
She never, ironically,
right.
She never went into the heroin as the deep dive.
Right. She just wasn't.
She just wanted that one time.
She just was kind of play around and eat like a normie, basically.
That was
heroin.
a gift. That was a gift from her.
Right.
This misery.
Right.
Amongst others. We won't get into that. But that was that. And so I don't remember how I got there. All I remember is I would profusely sweat in the back of the room with glasses on and a hoodie.
Right.
And I had all these people would be smiling and telling me it can be okay. They weren't saying it's gonna be okay. They were saying it can be okay.
It can be okay.
And they would say these, and then some guy gave me a coin and his phone number.
Right.
And I would go home and I would kick cold turkey. And a lot of times I didn't even have the energy to get up and go to a place. Mm-hmm. So I would just pick up a call. I'd pick up a phone and call these guys, and they would pick up at any hour.
Yeah.
I was blown away.
Yeah, that is
and they
mind-blowing.
had unconditional love for this
Right.
guy who's a stranger loser guy,
Yeah.
And there was this prayer. And I couldn't even remember the name of it.
Right.
It was a serenity prayer.
Right.
And I could not memorize it. So I would literally force myself to focus on the coin, and I would
still
read it.
sometimes forget the serenity prayer.
But I would read it.
Am I the courage to change, or is the
or wisdom to get the hell out of here?
Way.
Right. So and one day at a time, slowly but surely.
And
things
did
happened.
you? So,
but that wasn't the last time.
Yeah. Okay.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Because then I met my future wife.
Right.
I've been with Shelly now for 13 years.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was pretending to be sober.
Right.
She would look at me and go, do you take the Soma and the half a bar of Xanax at night for? I said, well, I need to sleep. And
Right.
she's like, that's not sober.
Right.
I was like, what are you talking about? And then that's when I met Chaz.
And so you were going to meetings and you weren't using heroin and you weren't drinking, but you were medicating yourself.
Oh, at night I thought that
Right.
was okay because I really had I had a spine injury, and the Somas were great for muscle relaxing and all that stuff. But yeah, it took a little bit of a.
How long was that sort of program going on?
Let's see. For a while, because my wife at that time, she was my girlfriend then, was sober,
right?
And it was Christmas Eve, and I had the pills still,
right?
And so
a year.
We both went. She went out with me.
And would you say that was a year that you were kind of doing that, or was it?
I guess maybe even longer than that.
2 years,
but
or
then
something?
So
Christmas Eve, you drag her down into your mess.
No, that was my ex.
Oh, that was your ex.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then my new one. I know it's really a bizarre story with lots of plot twists because things. Then we wound up. When I finally got sober was August 18th.
What year?
And that was 13 years ago.
Right.
So it was 2009
or something.
Yeah, 2009.
Right.
Yeah, August 18th, 2009. That was it.
What prompted that final realization?
Shelley, my wife.
Shelley.
Yeah.
And so you guys had met at a meeting?
Well, no, she had well, how long is this thing?
You're doing fine.
All right, because basically what happened was I was with a guy who is now unfortunately not with us.
Right.
We lost him.
Right.
He died. He OD'd. But he and I became friends. I let him stay at my place.
Right.
I think back then I was pseudo sober,
right.
is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And we were at the 101 diner after going to some clubs.
Right.
Not drinking.
Right.
And then we were at 101 diner, and there was these two girls sitting in another booth, and one of them was absolutely drop dead gorgeous. And I looked at his name was Jade, and I said, Jade, you should go talk to her. Right. And they hooked up. Right. And it turned out it was a rebound thing for her. That her, by the way, is now my wife.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So they kind of met, and they did their thing. Right. And then Jade, she broke up with him and said, this is ridiculous. And he moved back to Georgia, I think. Right. And then 4 months later, I bumped into her at another meeting, and I said, hey, I know you. Right. And she likes to think that I manipulated her a little bit with the kids, saying, hey, we should get the kids together.
Right. She's kids also?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I was like, no, that's... But we did. And we went on a date to Lucinda Williams, believe it or not. Right. It wasn't really a date. Right. I was in a meeting, and we happened to be on a phone texting, and she says, I'm at the El Rey. I'm watching Lucinda Williams. And I said, oh, my God, I love Lucinda Williams. She said, well, you should come down. Right. I went, oh, all right. After the meeting, I'll shoot over. Yeah. So I go over there. And I bought my ticket. I walk in, and I see a group of girls drinking Red Bulls, so I know that's them. Right. And so I walk up to her, and I'm looking at this, this white woman on stage singing. Right. And I almost said, when does Lucinda go on? Right. But I didn't, because I realized that I think that must be her. I got her confused with Diamanda Gala. Which, if you know who that is, I don't. She's nothing like Lucinda Williams, and I didn't want to let on to Shelley, because she's like, cut to after we get married. I fessed up to her. I said, that night, right? I didn't know who the hell I was. She goes, if I had known that before, I never would have married you. Right. I was like, so that was a secret that I was glad I kept till after smart boy marriage. Right. But that's where we.
Hey, Ralph. It's okay, boy.
So that's where we met. And we were actually inseparable ever since. Right.
And she helped you get sober?
Well, we both got loaded together.
Oh, you did get loaded
together.
Yeah,
it was Christmas Eve. We were wrapping gifts, and, I had some somas and things, and, because I thought that was normal. Right. And I was like, yeah, let's, and she goes, screw it, give me one. So
and why? Weren't you kind of like, you're sober, or you're just like, don't worry about it? No, how long had she been sober at that point?
I think at that point, she was a couple of years. She had 7 years. She went out on with dental work. Right. And then came back, and she had, I think, a year and a half or something like that. And then, she met me, and I screwed that up for her, so that's how that happened. But then we both got sober. I am very proud to say that I am the only one she's ever been with that has more time than her, and it's 18 days.
18 days. So how did that happen? How did you get sober first? Just
I do that cold turkey thing.
Right.
She does not.
Right.
And so, yeah. No, I mean, truthfully, she is. I consider her a much more spiritual and sober woman than I will ever be. Yeah. Not the woman part, but the sober part. Yeah. I am not the epitome of working a program. Right. It's not my. I'm not.
No, me neither.
My most important thing every morning is to not drink and use for a day.
Right. And how long has that been going on for? 13 years. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
August 18th was 13.
Wow.
And it's I've been blessed because I've got a really nice full life.
Right.
I used to drink and use whether things were bad or good.
Right.
It didn't matter. If things were really good, you party.
Yeah,
if things are really bad, you party. I mean, it's like that's just the way it was. Yeah. And now the beauty is we have 5 kids and I've got 3 grandkids, and Shooter's my youngest, and he's the only one that's never seen me ever have a drink or use.
And how old is he?
He's 12.
He's 12, right. Wow.
He's a rock star.
And how long have you guys been married?
13 years.
13 years.
Well, we did everything not recommended.
Right.
We got together in our first year.
Right.
We got pregnant in our first year. Got married in our first year, and we're still at it.
And by the time you got sober, had you wound down your cigar bar business, or did you sort of do that?
Yeah, I was out of that in 92 or 93, right. And then I had a boiler room.
What were you selling?
Cigars.
Cigars, right.
It was legit. But
right.
We had like 13 guys just
hawking
cigars.
Right.
But my supplier had a heart attack and died.
Right. And then what did you do? What was some of the other just relentless adventures?
You know what? Mostly events.
Right.
Since I've been out here, it's been mostly events. I have another side business. My wife recently, about a year ago, said that if I start another business, it'll end up in divorce.
Right.
She'll kill me.
So is this a secret?
Or death. Yeah. So I just have hobbies.
Right.
Side hobbies.
Side hobbies.
She called me on that. She says, I'm not stupid.
If you set up a C Corp for your hobby, it's no longer a hobby.
Right. So I asked her if LLCs matter, if they count. She said yes. And anything
DBA, can you do a DBA?
Anything that has to do with our accounting, the accountants.
Right. If the accountant's involved, it's no longer a hobby.
And I'm like, so I recently took shooter. These are like the blessings of being sober, man. It's like I thought life would be shit when I was, it was like, come on, it's fun to ride around on a motorcycle with a bottle of Knob Creek and a ton of drugs on you and go party all night. And then, I couldn't imagine having a really good time being a sober guy. But it just keeps getting better and better, and like my wife, this is the first time my wife looked at me during the summer and said, look, I'm not going to make it on a family vacation this year. We got the dogs and they're getting older and, just take shooter.
Right.
I'm like a boys thing? She's
like,
yeah. I'm like, a first boys thing? I'm like, I can go anywhere? She's like, yeah. I was like, we're going to Hawaii. And it took like 2 seconds to book the whole trip.
Right.
And me and Shooter flew out to Hawaii. We spent 11 days there.
What'd you guys do? Did you surf?
No, he's like the best kid in the world.
Right.
He's so low key.
Right.
Give him sand on the beach and a bodyboard.
He's happy.
He'll be out there all day long. I tried to take him on the helicopter. He's like, hell no.
Right.
Said we went snorkeling.
Right.
And he did the first dive, and on the second dive he said, yeah, I'm good. Right. So we just chilled out.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
We just hung out. We rented that Vanderhall.
Right.
Which you saw outside.
Yeah, so cool.
And I've become a Vanderhall junkie now, so I absolutely love my
I see a new business coming.
But what happened, what was really crazy, was we were out there, and getting older. I'm 55 now, and my skin is not the same.
Right.
I'm not that guy who goes out and gets dark anymore.
Yeah,
now I get red and blotchy.
Yeah.
And so I would wear these headbands.
Right.
And I forgot them here. So I said, Shooter, I said, come on, let's hop in. We're going on a mission. We went to Walmart. We went to Costco, Target, all these on Maui. We went into all these boutiques. We went into Old Navy, went into every Walgreens. We went everywhere. Do you know you can't find, can you curse on this thing?
Yeah, of course.
You can't find a fucking headband in Maui anywhere.
Wow.
I was going so crazy. Finally, I bought 2 kids' headbands and put them together and made a makeshift one so I could get, so it could be right. I got back to the hotel. I went online. I own a development company too, tech company.
Right.
So I went online and I grabbed the name shakabands.com.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Created a logo from there, designed a bunch of them, and from Maui in the hotel room, launched shakabands.com.
Nice. I'm going to go buy one.
No, they're not. It's not really like
you can't really do
but it's fun.
Yeah,
but no, it should be. I just haven't figured out the taxes yet.
What was I going to ask you? There was something else. Shooter. Is that his real name?
It is.
And why
Shooter Elliott Dane.
What was the...
Shelley loved the name. I think, kind of because of Waylon Jennings' kid, Shooter Jennings. But see, that's not really his name.
Right.
He got that name because every time they would take his diaper off,
he'd squirt
straight up. He'd just piss straight up. And they named him Shooter.
That's amazing.
That's what
Carry that your whole life. Yeah. Wow.
And then Elliot is his middle name.
Well, this has been great. I think what a fun, interesting story. I had no idea that the Melrose Flea and that's the Silver Lake Flea is what we call it. The one at Marshall, Los Feliz Flea. She also goes to the Silver Lake Flea. There's just like part of our routines. You're like a bona fide celebrity in this household.
Oh, that's awesome. She has to come say hi.
I will. I'll make sure she tracks you down next time she's there. I'm sure she won't be able to find you, but she'll try.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, it's usually Shelly that's there.
Right.
So, but I'd love Shelly to meet her. That'd be great. Shelly's there every Saturday.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
That's it. Really, I loved it.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So I'm really thankful that you invited me because this is a blast. I got to like reminisce about old stories.
The whole thing.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, cool.
All right.
Thanks for listening. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/thedrunkalogs.